Guys, Chenglei's in the game. She's so hot, I had to make it a tier list. What's going on, guys? So I haven't made as many Wuthering Waves videos as I would have liked to, just due to, you know, all the things that are going on. If you didn't see my last video, I don't want to go into all that. I just want to talk about how things have sort of changed for me, and in my opinion, since the first tier list that I made, because a lot of characters we're finding to be more useful than before, now specifically that we're in endgame, and a lot of characters that we're going, oh, actually, maybe this wasn't as good as we initially thought. So I want to give you guys my thoughts on where I would place all these characters. Keep in mind, guys, this is going to be my opinion on things. It is impossible to make a truly 100% factual tier list just because characters play out so differently in different types of content and with different characters and with different weapons. There's too many variables to make an objective tier list, but I'm going to try my best to keep my opinions rooted in theory crafting, as I always try to do. There's been a lot of changes from the initial tier list. A lot of the characters are about the power level that we thought they would be, but there's some characters that just perform better in practice, and as always, gameplay is king. So with that said, let's get started. So let's start with Havoc Rover, my beloved. I love Havoc Rover so much. Very cool character, awesome design, the ability to use a scythe or a sword. I mean, basically both of them together, but I just think the scythe is really sick. They're a really sick character, but you know what's even more sick than that is their multipliers, because they are ridiculously high. Their ultimate is a huge nuke. And on top of that, they're just really sick. Gotta love the one-winged angel references and all that. So I personally would put Havoc Rover in A tier right now. The only reason I'm putting them in A tier and not S tier is because we have had some characters that are just absolutely disgustingly broken. And this is a character that, even though she is insanely good, I do think there is going to be a separation between what makes her insanely good, or him if you play male Havoc Rover, and some of the top characters, the best characters in the entire game. So that said, Havoc Rover, I'd probably put in A tier. What do I mean by the best characters in the game? I mean characters like Verena, who are like objectively good in basically every single team composition in the game. She's a healer, she's a buffer, she's a buffer with her outro skill separately from her other buffs. She can use the healing set, which is also able to buff your team. Like, she's just too good of a character for you to possibly put in the A tier. And this separation is what makes this fair, in my opinion. Verena's too good. She's still the best 5-star standard pull. Let's talk about Spect Rover, though. Spect Rover honestly is not that bad, and now that we have a Spectro DPS in the form of Ginchi, the Spectro Res Shred becomes even more useful. They get some healing, but also their damage is just pretty good. They get the time stop thing, which is just kind of a neat mechanic, but overall, Spectro Rover is not that bad. I would put Spect Rover in B tier. Definitely not as good as Havoc Rover. Havoc Rover is on another level, but Spect Rover is decent, especially now that Ginchi is out. They have a lot more use cases. As for Yangyang, this one's a little bit of a controversial one. So the deal with Yangyang is that her outro skill gives you a bunch of energy over time. It gives you 20 energy over 5 seconds, so 4 energy per second. And that is a useful mechanic in itself, because like any sort of energy funneling is always going to be really good. It's going to be really good for the game, and for any characters that can utilize that energy funneling to be able to pump out more damage. Even with Havoc Rover, which I haven't seen a lot of people talking about, but she is really good with Havoc Rover as well. The only downside is that it's over 5 seconds, and sometimes you won't even want the character on field for 5 seconds if you're quickly swapping around. So it does require a character who's going to want some field time if you plan on using their ultimate in that same rotation. However, if you're playing a quick swappy team, you can always just swap to her, use the outro skill swap to that character, swap off, swap back later, and just keep doing that to try to funnel as much energy as possible. But I think the fact that it's just the 20 energy over 5 seconds does make it a little bit tougher for her. Also, her damage is okay. It's not super bad or anything, but just like in comparison to what some of the other characters can do, I can't put her in B tier. I don't think. I'm going to put her in C tier. I do think we're going to end up getting a 5-star version of what she does that just funnels a ton of energy into the next character and gives an amplification effect. So putting her in C tier, but arguably B tier, depending on who you're using with her. Sanhua, easy A tier. Easy A tier. Insanely good DPS character. People are finding uses for her every single day, and she does have an effect that's going to increase basic attack damage, the amplification effect specifically. So on her outro skill, she gets amplified to the rest of your team, which means any characters that are using basic attacks, she benefits them a lot. Sanhua also has a tech that basically amplifies her damage by a ton, specifically, well, amplify is not the right word because that's like an actual effect, but it increases her damage by a massive amount with her sequence nodes due to what I think is probably a bug, and that makes her damage just ridiculously good. It was already good to begin with, but yeah, Sanhua is an amazing character. Definitely up in the top tiers, so I'd put her in A tier. Let's look at the next character, Baiti. So this one's a little controversial because in my opinion, she's basically budget Verena, but she's free. So there's not really any downside to using her outside of how long it takes her to charge her Concerto gauge, which allows you to trigger your outro skill. So I can't put her in the same tier as Verena, but overall she heals. She can use the healing set for buffs. She buffs your team, and she's a really solid character overall. The only downside is, like I said, it takes a little bit longer to build up that outro skill. And because it takes long to build up the outro skill, she'll never be as good as Verena. Also, just the values on her are just not going to be as good, but she's a pretty solid character overall. Now, I think that time loss on building up her outro is pretty significant. Until we find a tech for that, I'm going to put her in B tier. I do think she could easily be A tier once we figure out how to build her outro skill like incredibly fast. Until then, she's definitely B tier character. Pretty good, better than average in C tier, but definitely not like super giga S tier, debatably A tier. Just it depends on who you are. I'm gonna put her in B tier. Yeonwoo, I do believe that this guy was overestimated towards the beginning of the game, but I think we still haven't unlocked his latent potential here, all right? The guy's still got a black flash to hit her too. I think that he could end up being pretty good given the right character releases. And in fact, with Yinlin out, he does become a little bit better just because of that electro damage increase, or not electro damage, that electro amplify. But as of right now, it's a little tough to say just because he doesn't play like any of the other characters in the game. His rotations are a little strange, especially if you want to keep the pillars up all the time. And with everyone just focusing on swapping out very frequently and just triggering effect after effect after effect, he doesn't quite fit that just yet, but I do think there will come a time where he will be in B or A tier. Right now, he is in C tier. Mortify, this guy is so good. He's basically Xingqiu without the like damage reduction stuff. So he's going to increase your heavy attack. He's going to amplify your heavy attacks on the next character, and he's going to do coordinated fire damage. Now his damage contribution is not going to be anything close to your main on-field damage dealer, but when Mortify's on field, his damage is actually pretty decent. The main thing we care about is the heavy attack amplify, which he is going to provide a lot of for your upcoming characters, and that's mostly going to be like characters like Jian. So I'm going to put him over in B tier. I do think he's really good, and as more characters come out, he might even slide up to the A tier. Debatably could even be A tier as he is now. I'm gonna go and put him in B. I think he's genuinely very good, but definitely not competing damage wise with Havoc Rover, right? It's just not happening. But with that said, while we're on the topic of Jian, I'm actually going to put Jian in S tier. And the reason I'm going to put Jian all the way up here in S tier is because the guy is just too cracked. His AoE damage is insane, and his single target damage is also insane. But right now, Tower of Adversity is a lot of AoE. We do have some bosses, and he also makes parrying the bosses incredibly easy because he just attacks so many times. So he makes bosses easy. He's decent in single target. He's insane in AoE, and he not only does he do a lot of AoE damage, he scoops up enemies and brings them with him in AoE. So the guy is just absolutely cracked. His damage is really crazy. And overall, he's a super good pick, especially if you're going to go into Tower of Adversity, which is going to be the high-end content. Very solid character all around. Taoqi's a little unlucky here. So the thing is, she does reduce the damage that you're going to take, and her damage is honestly not very good. She does have an outro skill that amplifies your resonant skill damage, which is cool. Right now, there's not a ton of characters that are just spamming skill only. You can do that with Havoc Rover, actually, and it's decent. But the thing is, she's damage reduction in exchange for some of her damage overall. Like, they didn't give her insane multipliers or anything to combat the fact that she is also capable of being a pseudo support. But when you have characters like Verena here in S tier, it gets really hard to justify running her, and she's not really that great for damage either in comparison to some of the other options we have. So personally, I'm putting Taoqi in D tier. A little sad about it because I really want her to be just like absurdly good, but I just feel like right now she's not in a very good place. Chisha is going to be a controversial one because a lot of people have seen the clip of the machine gun Chisha, who literally just absolutely mows down enemies. If you guys haven't seen it, it's a macro or like a clicking tech that you can do to just rapid fire Chisha. Most of the time, I'm going to guess it's a macro for like 99% of people because the speed at which they're doing that is ridiculous. There's just no way. I'm going to go ahead and put Chisha in C tier. I know that with a macro, she is fucking broken, but without the macro and just in general gameplay, her damage doesn't hold up with some of the higher tier damage dealers. She's okay. She does require a lot of like really active field time. She can't really be super quick swapped as well as some of the other characters. She's decent overall. I just don't think she's like super worth investing into unless she's just one of your like favorite characters. Now, Alto, I'm going to be honest, I think the last time I put him down in C tier, after seeing his sequence nodes in play and playing him some more on the release of the game and playing him in high-end content, I think specifically at high investment, this guy ends up being pretty dang good. I would put him up in B tier. His arrow damage amplify on his way out, and his damage actually isn't too bad, especially with the sequence nodes. It does get a lot better. So I'm putting him up in B tier. Definitely not a bad character, and I'm actually really glad because I always thought he was like a really cool character. It just didn't feel great without the sequence nodes, and with them, he's like a different character. And also because Jian is so strong, he is a potential partner for Jian as well, and that does help Jian's damage as well with the amplify. The dungeon's a little bit controversial as well, mostly because this character was a character that was absolutely broken in previous CVTs and is still very solid overall. She also has Havoc damage amplify, which can help out your Havoc Rover, can help out Tauchi, can help out any other Havoc damage dealers in the future. The problem is that Dungeon is very much a solo carry DPS, and though she can do some solid on-field damage, her entire kit, the value of it for her is really good because you can solo bosses with her. She's really good at self-sustaining if you are a high-skill player, but if you're not a high-skill player, she falls off really hard because then she's dead. She does provide that Havoc damage amplify, which I think is really, really solid, but I don't feel that she can match Havoc Rover just because of her high skill ceiling. I think if you are a super good player, Dungeon has the potential to be up in A tier for sure. I'm gonna put her in B tier to be safe. I think the average player is not going to get as much value out of Dungeon as others, especially now that they've removed that tech that people were using. Oh, and I should clarify, because I just moved her here, but there wasn't any specific reason. These aren't in order in the tiers, and I probably should have said that at the start of the video. But it is okay. We move on. Yilin is another character that came out recently, and yeah, I'm just gonna throw up an S tier, man. A lot of people don't like Yilin. They don't like how she plays. They don't like the off-field damage that she can deal. They don't like how clunky, quote unquote, she feels. Now, I personally don't feel like she feels clunky at all because she has so many opportunities to be swapped off-field and played in very fast-paced teams. I have had a really good time with Yilin. I feel like she is a very strong character. Electro damage amplify and resonance liberation amplify is really strong, and she's definitely up there. I can see arguments for being in A tier, but just her as a sub DPS, her value is really good. Her as an on-field character or a quick swap character is also incredible. I think she's definitely an S tier character. Okay, let's just get this one out of the way. We can move on to the next character. I'm just kidding. Lingyang, so the problem is he takes too long to wind up. The damage output that he gets for wind up is not that good. You basically need his Forte circuit to be completely active for him to do a ton of damage, but he doesn't get to actually do that much damage even when he's in Forte circuit. And even then it takes so long to build up the Forte circuit that he just is not on par with a lot of the other DPS characters. If you don't know what I'm talking about, check out 1010's video. 1010 literally has been playing Lingyang since launch of this game, and bro hates the character, but he loves the character's design, so he keeps playing the character. He was DMing me the other day. He was like, yeah, I think I might just make a video about everything wrong with this character specifically. I hope that the devs go back and rework or like retune his numbers even a little bit because he has so much potential, but like the fact that a 4-star that you can get for free Sanhua is just out damaging this 5-star character is really not great. And I mean, no, it's great for players. Like, don't get me wrong, you know, if you're a free-to-play player, I love that Sanhua does a ton of damage. I don't want them to nerf Sanhua, but I really want them to boost up Lingyang so he's a much better character. I'm putting him in D tier. I'm sorry, guys, if you guys are Lingyang believers. I am not, unfortunately. Genshin. Perhaps I treated you too harshly. Genshin Impact. She is actually a very good character in a way that nobody was really expecting until we got to endgame. So the one commonality we saw when people were clearing Tower of Adversity in the first couple of weeks of the game is that they were bringing Genshin. Now, why would they bring a Genshin? Pop quiz, guys. Was it because of A, her damage, B, her shield, C, she's really cute, or D, her grouping abilities? If you guys picked answer C, you'd probably be right for like some of the people, but it's not actually that. Genshin's damage is not that great. Her shield is like nice. You would replace Verena with her basically because you wouldn't want to run a healer and a shielder together. There's no point. But the real value in Genshin is actually her grouping utility. She could do 0 damage at all. She could do literally no damage at all. And she would be a great character. You know why? Because she brings all of the enemies into one place with a really strong tornado on her ultimate. And in Tower of Adversity, when you have like 12 enemies to kill, she just like bringing all those enemies together means you can clear out wave 1 super fast. People also figured out Mech Abomination has quadratic scaling, which means if you run Mech Abomination, you can drop that on the enemies and then they all get hit and it's just a lot of damage. But all in all, Genshin is basically just a grouping character, sort of like Venti in Genshin Impact. Now, here's my beef with Genshin. 1, the damage honestly is pretty negligible. 2, the shield is fine, but it's honestly not going to be super game breaking, right? Generally, I would prefer to take a healer over a shielder in this game, unless there's an enemy that literally just one-shots you at all times. But now that we're all getting to a higher level, odds are less likely that we're going to get one shot all the time. But my biggest gripe with Genshin specifically, and excuse the cut, this is a later edit I made because I don't feel like I worded it the way I wanted to the first time, is that she could easily be removed from the meta of this game with the introduction of enemies that are immovable. Basically, enemies that have too much weight to them to where they can't be grouped, or just more boss fights. Basically, as soon as you have an immovable enemy or an ungroupable enemy, the character can get phased out, and it's not uncommon of games to add new enemies with heavier weights to them or just more bosses. So I think it's highly likely and highly probable that in the future, Genshin will be just completely phased out, depending on if the devs of Wuthering Waves want to make the game significantly harder or not. Because I'm gonna be honest, like maybe they don't care and Genshin is just pretty good forever, right? But it's also highly likely that that is not going to be the case, just because the devs are probably going to want to sell certain characters. And honestly, if they have a character in the game that makes every single piece of hard content easy, they're going to have to find some way to change it. There are other games on the market that you may or may not play that have already done this. And if you know what I'm talking about, you've seen it in action. Rotating metas where they change what characters are actually viable in endgame and not. It's a really common thing. So while she is very, very good, that's my biggest concern about her. Kalcharo is a character that a lot of people actually, I think a lot of people did like him. I think a lot of people don't like him now. If you like Kalcharo, let me know in the comments, because I heard some mixed opinions and some differing opinions that were not there at launch. I like Kalcharo a lot. I think he's a really cool character. I think he's really complex. The thing is, a lot of theory crafters were banking on this guy being able to do certain techs and movements on launch, and he was not able to do the ones that we thought he was going to be able to do. And on top of that, specifically with Yinlin, now that Yinlin is out, he's even stronger, right? This combination is really, really wicked. But the downside to Kalcharo is that he is very fucking hard to play, like insanely difficult to play. Not in the same way as Dungeon, where if you get hit once you die, but just he has so many different combos. His frames are a little weird, and there's not a ton of characters that synergize with him super well. But with that said, his damage output when you play him well, and when you're doing lots of actions and you understand your team and the core of them, you understand his timings and things, he is a very rewarding character. Not as strong as I would say Encore is, because Encore is a much more forgiving character when it comes to gameplay style. You don't need to have like a giga optimized rotation to make Encore good. But I don't believe Encore is S tier at the moment, just because Jian is so insane, and because we got another character that I'm going to be putting up in S tier in a second. It's really tough for me to put Encore up there, but I do think at the moment she's definitely a little bit better than Kalcharo. Easier to play, more rewarding, but Kalcharo is a super solid character. I would say both these characters are an A tier. Now we're down to our last two ladies, our lovely ladies. I think Ginchi is someone that everyone wants to know about right now, so let's just talk about where Jinchi's at. Guys, I don't know how to break it to you, okay? I understand that those of you guys who like Kamisato Ayaka and Genshin Impact, this is like your primordial wife, but unfortunately, there is no double S tier, so I'm gonna put her up in S tier. I know, heartbreaking news. Insanely heartbreaking. I can't believe this. Yeah, no, she's an S tier unit for sure. She's so good. Her damage output is ridiculous. She's a little bit complicated, a little bit hard to get the hang of, but her damage output is crazy good. And she's pretty fun to play. I've gotten to play her. I didn't pull her on my free to play because she's just not a character that I was looking forward to personally, but I was genuinely very surprised at her power level. It's nice to have a dedicated Spectro DPS character that is a limited 5-star, because that means that we're eating good. If you're a Spectro enjoyer, you want to play Spectro MC, Ginchi is a really strong character. Her ultimate is like a crazy nuke, like that caused Fallout 5 to be developed. Like, this is insane damage. If you pull Ginchi and you invest into her in the right teams, you are easily clearing endgame content. I'm just gonna keep it real. Does that mean you have to go pull her? Absolutely not. Like, people have been clearing endgame content with free-to-play characters at this point. It's tough. Don't get me wrong, it's tough, but like, you know, you can clear the content with a lot of the characters in the game, especially now that people are getting things built and they're understanding how the game works. So you don't need to pull for her, but she is very strong. I actually genuinely love the fact that we have a Spectre DPS character that is incredibly strong now. So Ginchi up in S tier for sure. And lastly, we need to talk about the best looking character in Wuthering Waves. I'm sorry, Havoc Rover. I'm sorry, Yinlin. This is one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make. Rover is just hot. Yinlin looks like she would ruin me, but like as a joke, like not serious. You know, maybe she's actually like a nice lady under all that. But Shangli looks like she would ruin me because it's amusing, because she thinks it's funny, and that's really sick. So I've actually gotten to play Shangli just a tiny bit, just a little bit, because of that story segment. And actually, if you go over to Wuthering Waves right now and you go over to your menus, you can actually look at Shangli and what she does. And oh, she's so fucking hot, man. I'm cooked. Look at the thigh bed. It's literally, it's squeezing the life out of her thighs. I wish she would squeeze the life out of me. Anyway, she's a fusion sword user, and you guys can play her if you do the story. But yeah, she's a very good character overall based on her multipliers alone. However, we haven't gotten to play her in like endgame content, so it's impossible to tell how she actually performs in endgame. All we can do is look at multipliers and try to theory craft rotations, but realistically, we don't have all the frame count data done. Well, my math guy doesn't have the frame count data done. I'm sure someone does. But we have not mathed left out her exact strength. What I've seen from other people's calcs is she looks like she is going to hold up with a lot of the other 5-star DPS characters. But the thing that's really exciting about her is that she has a fusion damage amplify and a resonance liberation damage amplify. So basically she is like Yinlin for fusion damage characters. You know, we have Yinlin called Charo with the electro damage. Now we have Encore and Chengli, who basically serve the same functions relative to each other. The only difference is that Encore plays a lot different from Kalcharo. So will the value of Chengli actually be as good? It's debatable, and we'll have to see, and we'll have to play her. But with all that in mind, hello, it's another cut here. I don't want to put her on the list yet. We haven't gotten to really see how she performs in the highest level content, and truthfully, it takes a long time to actually test these characters out and see all the cool synergies they have, especially in Wuthering Waves, because there's so many cool things you can do with different characters, different enemies, and different content, and you really have to just get in there and like get a feel for the character. So even though her damage, I will just say her damage looks really good right now, I'm not going to put her on this list yet because I want to see how things turn out. But based on just calculations, based on the summary of her kit in the game, she does look like she's going to be really good. I'm just not going to put her in yet. If you want to see my thoughts on Chengli, which I'm sure you guys already know how I feel about her, that will be my Chengli guide, which will be out as soon as she's released or right after she's released. So I can't wait to share that with you guys. So this is the finalized tier list. Before we go, let me know who your favorite characters are in Wuthering Waves and if they've changed from launch, because a lot of people went into Wuthering Waves like, I'm gonna main this character, and then they decided that they liked another character better down the line, or they just discovered some cool synergies. Let me know who your favorite character is, if you're pulling for Chengli, and I'll catch you guys next time.